The sun beat down on Dust Gulch, baking the wooden buildings and turning the dirt streets into shimmering mirages. Sarah shielded her eyes, the sweat stinging as she looked out from her small, rented room above the general store. Dust devils danced in the distance, mocking her solitude. 6 months along, and the weight of the child felt heavier each day, not just physically, but with the burden of its parentage. She was alone, truly alone, in a town that thrived on gossip and judgment. Folks whispered behind their hands, their eyes following her with a mixture of pity and scorn. Unmarried and pregnant was a heavy cross to bear in these parts, but the fact that the father was Snake Jedediah made it almost unbearable. Jedediah, or Jed as she knew him in the stolen moments they shared beneath the vast, unforgiving sky. He was a phantom limb, a memory that ached with a bittersweet longing. His name conjured images of burning campfires, stolen kisses, and promises whispered in the darkness. He was a wanted man, a legend whispered around campfires, a terror to some, a hero to others. To her, he was both a curse and a blessing. Their affair had been a whirlwind, a dangerous dance with fate. He'd ridden into town one day, bold and brash, his eyes the color of gunmetal, and singled her out from the crowd. She, a simple shop girl, swept off her feet by his charisma and the thrill of his outlaw life. It was foolish, she knew, but she couldn't resist. He had a way of looking at her that made her feel like the only woman in the world. The affair lasted only a few weeks before he disappeared as quickly as he'd arrived, leaving her with more than just memories. She discovered her pregnancy soon after, a secret she guarded fiercely, knowing the storm it would unleash if revealed. Now the secret was becoming harder to hide. Her belly swelled with each passing day, a constant reminder of her transgression. She feared Jed's return, not for herself, but for the child. He was a dangerous man, a man who lived by his own rules, and she had no idea what he would do if he found out about the baby. Would he claim it? Would he take it away? She longed for a different life, a life where she could raise her child in peace, free from the shadow of Jedediah. But in Dust Gulch, secrets had a way of unraveling, and Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before her past caught up with her. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on her, heavy as the desert sun. Jedediah wasn't just a name. It was a brand seared into the collective memory of the West. Snake-Eye Jed, they called him, a moniker earned from his unervingly still gaze and his lightning-fast draw. Some claimed he could outdraw a rattlesnake. Others swore he had a pact with the devil himself. He was a phantom, appearing and disappearing as quickly as a desert mirage, leaving behind a trail of whispered legends and tall tales. Sarah closed her eyes, and the memories flooded back, sharp and vivid as broken glass. She remembered the first time she saw him, leaning against the hitching post outside the saloon, a coiled rope of muscle and sinew. He wore a worn leather duster, its edges frayed from countless rides across the unforgiving terrain. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but she could still see the glint in his eyes, a spark of mischief and danger that both terrified and intrigued her. Flashback. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Jed had sauntered into the general store, his spurs jingling a defiant rhythm against the wooden floor. He scanned the shelves, his gaze lingering on Sarah. "Mornin'," he drawled, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down her spine. "Needin' some supplies." Sarah, usually shy and reserved, found herself strangely drawn to him. "What can I get for you, mister?" "Jedediah," he supplied, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Jedediah Stone. And you are?" "Sarah," she whispered, her cheeks flushing. He purchased a few provisions, jerky, beans, coffee, but lingered, engaging her in conversation. He spoke of faraway places, of wide-open plains and snow-capped mountains, of a life lived on the edge. She, in turn, spoke of her quiet existence in Dust Gulch, her dreams of a life beyond the dusty confines of the store. That night, he waited for her outside her room. Fear warred with fascination as she crept out to meet him. Under the cloak of darkness, He revealed a tenderness she never expected. He spoke of his loneliness, of the burden of his reputation, of his yearning for something more. Their stolen moments were electric, fueled by passion and a shared sense of recklessness. They rode together under the starlit sky, shared whispered secrets by crackling campfires, and found solace in each other's arms. He showed her a world beyond Dust Gulch, a world of freedom and adventure, a world she desperately craved. But even in those moments of intimacy, there was always a shadow lurking. The knowledge that their affair was doomed, that Jed was a man who could never truly be tamed. He was a wild spirit destined to roam free, and she was just a temporary port in his storm. In flashback, the memory faded, leaving Sarah with a hollow ache in her chest. Jed was a force of nature, a man who could charm the birds from the trees and just as easily break a man's bones. He was a dangerous man, but he was also the most alive person she had ever known. And she knew, deep down, that his return would bring nothing but trouble. The arrival of Cole was subtle, almost unnoticed at first. He rode into Dust Gulch on a dusty roan, his movements economical and deliberate. He wasn't flashy like Jed, no swagger or boastful grin. He simply dismounted in front of the saloon, tied his horse to the hitching post, and stepped inside. He was a study in contrasts. His face was weathered and lined, suggesting a life lived outdoors, but his eyes were a clear, unwavering blue, holding a quiet intensity. He wore a simple, dark-colored shirt and trousers, and a worn leather vest. His gun belt was low-slung, the holster worn smooth from years of use. The Colt Peacemaker at his hip was more than just a weapon. It was an extension of himself. Whispers followed him as he moved through the saloon. "That's Cole," someone murmured. "Heard he's fast. Fastest there is," another voice replied, hushed with a mixture of awe and fear. "They say he can shoot the wings off a fly at 50 paces. Cole ignored the whispers, making his way to the bar. He ordered a whiskey, neat, and took a slow sip, his gaze sweeping the room, taking in every detail. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he was ready for it. Sarah watched him from her window above the general store. There was something about him that set him apart from the other men who drifted through Dust Gulch. He carried himself with a quiet dignity, a sense of purpose that was both reassuring and unsettling. He wasn't like Jed, who thrived on chaos and attention. Cole seemed to prefer to blend into the background, observing, assessing. Old Man Hemlock, the town's grizzled bartender, knew Cole by reputation. He'd heard the stories, tales of Cole's unwavering sense of justice, his willingness to stand up for the underdog, his uncanny ability with a gun. He'd seen men like Cole before, men who carried the weight of the world on their shoulders, men who were driven by a code that few understood. "Looking for something, friend?" Hemlock asked, polishing a glass. Cole turned, his gaze meeting Hemlock's. "Just passing through," he said, his voice low and even. "Looking for a little peace and quiet." Hemlock chuckled. "Peace and quiet ain't easy to come by in these parts." Cole nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. He sensed the tension in the air, the unspoken fears that haunted Dust Gulch. He knew there was more to this town than met the eye, and he had a feeling that his search for peace and quiet was about to be interrupted. He could feel in his bones the quiet before the storm. He just didn't know how big the storm was going to be, or who it would involve. Yet, the storm Cole sensed arrived in the form of a black stallion, ridden hard, kicking up a cloud of dust that momentarily obscured the already fading sunset. Snake-Eye Jed was back. He rode straight through town, ignoring the wary glances of the townsfolk, his eyes scanning the buildings, searching. He reined in his horse in front of the general store, dismounted with a practiced ease, and strode inside, his spurs clinking a warning. The saloon went silent. Cole, who had been nursing his whiskey at the bar, watched him with a detached curiosity, his hand never straying far from his gun. Jed's voice boomed through the store. "Sarah, where are you, darling?" Sarah, who had been helping Mrs. Henderson pack groceries, froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. She knew this moment was inevitable, but she wasn't prepared for it. Jed found her quickly, his eyes blazing with a mixture of possessiveness and anger. He grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "What's this I hear about you carrying my child?" he demanded, his voice low and menacing. Sarah flinched, pulling away from him. "Let go of me, Jed," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't you Jed me," he snarled. "You're carrying my get, and you didn't tell me? You think you can hide something like that from me?" Mrs. Henderson gasped, clutching her chest. Other customers scurried out of the store, leaving Sarah alone with Jed. Cole, seeing Sarah's distress, stepped forward. He moved with a quiet grace, his presence instantly commanding attention. "Let her go, friend," he said, his voice calm but firm. Jed turned, his eyes narrowing as he took in Cole's imposing figure. "And who the hell are you?" "Someone who doesn't like seeing a woman manhandled," Cole replied, his gaze unwavering. "This ain't your concern," Jed growled, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun. "This is between me and her. When it involves hurting a woman, it becomes my concern," Cole said, his voice hardening. He could see the fear in Sarah's eyes, the vulnerability that Jed was exploiting. The tension in the store was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knew what was coming. A showdown. A confrontation between two men, both skilled with a gun, both willing to kill. Jed's eyes flicked between Cole and Sarah. "So that's how it is?" He sneered. "You found yourself a protector, huh, Sarah? A little tin star to hide behind." Sarah shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, Jed, just go. You're scaring me." "Scared?" Jed laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You ain't seen nothing yet." He looked back at Cole, his eyes filled with venom. "This ain't over," he hissed. "Not by a long shot." He released Sarah's arm, shoved past Cole, and stormed out of the store, leaving a trail of fear and unease in his wake. Cole watched him go, his expression grim. He knew that Jed's return had changed everything. Dust Gulch was no longer just a dusty, forgotten town. It was a powder keg waiting to explode, and Sarah was caught in the middle. He had to do something. He just didn't know what yet. But he knew he couldn't stand by and watch Jed terrorize her. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. But inside the Dust Gulch saloon, the atmosphere was far from picturesque. Tension hung thick in the air, heavy as the smoke that swirled around the dimly lit room. Jed had returned, and he wasn't leaving without making his presence known. He swaggered into the saloon, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Cole, who was sitting at a corner table, nursing a drink. Jed sauntered over, his spurs clinking a menacing rhythm against the wooden floor. Well, Jed drawled, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "If it ain't the town's new hero." Cole looked up, his gaze unwavering. "I'm just a man looking for a quiet drink." "Is that so?" Jed chuckled, a harsh, grating sound. "Seems to me you're looking for trouble. Messin' in business that ain't yours." "I make it my business when I see someone being harassed," Cole replied, his voice calm but firm. Jed leaned closer, his face inches from Cole's. "You got no idea who you're dealing with, mister." "I have a pretty good idea," Cole said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're a bully who likes to prey on the weak." A muscle twitched in Jed's jaw. "Careful what you say, Tin Star. Words can get you killed in these parts." "Actions can too," Cole countered, his hand hovering near his gun. The saloon fell silent, every eye fixed on the two men. Old Man Hemlock, the bartender, wiped down the counter, his movements slow and deliberate, ready for anything. He'd seen plenty of confrontations in his time, and he knew how quickly they could escalate. "I'm warning you," Jed hissed, his voice low and menacing. "Stay away from Sarah. She's mine." "She's her own woman," Cole replied, his gaze unwavering. "And she deserves to be treated with respect." "Respect," Jed laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Respect is for those who earn it. And she ain't earned nothing but trouble." "Maybe you're the one who's brought the trouble," Cole suggested, his voice dangerously soft. Jed's hand tightened into a fist. He took a step back, his eyes blazing with anger. "This ain't over," he snarled. "I'm going to make you regret the day you ever set foot in Dust Gulch." "I'll be waiting," Cole said, his voice calm and steady. Jed spat on the floor, turned on his heel, and stormed out of the saloon, leaving a palpable tension in his wake. Cole watched him go, his expression grim. He knew that Jed's threat was more than just empty words. He was a dangerous man, a man who wouldn't hesitate to kill to get what he wanted. And he wanted Sarah. The rivalry was set, and the stage was set for a showdown. The question was, who will be left standing when the dust settled? And what will be left of Dust Gulch? Jed's threats weren't idle. He was a man of action, and his actions spoke volumes. He began a campaign of terror, designed to force Sarah to his will and break the spirit of Dust Gulch. It started small, petty acts of vandalism. Windows smashed, livestock stolen, goods pilfered from the general store. But it quickly escalated. One morning, the townsfolk awoke to find the sheriff's office burned to the ground, a smoldering ruin that symbolized the lawlessness that Jed was imposing on the town. The sheriff, a timid man named Bart, had wisely fled in the night, leaving Dust Gulch without any official protection. Then came the threats, delivered in whispers and scrawled on walls. Sarah, come to Jed, or more will suffer. The townsfolk, already fearful, became paralyzed with terror. They blamed Sarah, their resentment simmering beneath the surface. Jed's ruthlessness knew no bounds. He held up the stagecoach, not for money, but to send a message. He let the passengers go, but he shot the horses, leaving them stranded miles from civilization. It was a cruel and senseless act, designed to demonstrate his power and his disregard for innocent lives. Sarah watched the town crumble around her, consumed by guilt and despair. She knew that Jed was doing all of this to get to her, to force her to choose between him and the safety of the town. She considered giving herself up, surrendering to his demands, but she knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would only embolden him, and he would continue to terrorize Dust Gulch. Cole, meanwhile, watched Jed's actions with growing anger. He saw the fear in the eyes of the townsfolk, the desperation in Sarah's gaze. He knew that he couldn't stand by and let Jed destroy everything. He tried to reason with the townsfolk, to organize them into a posse, but they were too afraid. They had lost faith in the law, in each other, in themselves. They were easy prey for a man like Jed. One evening, Jed and his men rode into town, firing their guns into the air. They gathered in front of the saloon, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of the lanterns. Jed dismounted and addressed the terrified townsfolk. "I'm giving you one last chance," he shouted, his voice echoing through the deserted streets. "Hand over Sarah, and I'll leave you in peace. Refuse, and I'll burn this town to the ground." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone looked at Sarah, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear and accusation. The choice was hers. The fate of Dust Gulch rested on her shoulders. And Cole knew that he couldn't let her face this alone. This was no longer just about Sarah. It was about justice, about standing up to tyranny, about protecting the innocent. He had to make a stand, even if it meant facing Snake-Eye Jed in a final, deadly showdown. He stepped out of the shadows. Cole stepped out of the shadows, his presence a beacon of defiance in the face of Jed's tyranny. He stood tall, his gaze fixed on Jed, his hand hovering near his gun. The townsfolk gasped, their eyes widening in a mixture of fear and hope. "Leave them alone, Jed," Cole said, his voice calm but firm, cutting through the tense silence. "This town has suffered enough." Jed laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the deserted streets. "Well, look who it is. The hero of Dust Gulch. You think you can stop me, Tin Star?" "I know I can," Cole replied, his voice unwavering. "You're a bully, Jed, and bullies always get what's coming to them." Jed's men shifted nervously, their hands twitching near their own weapons. They knew Cole's reputation. They knew he was fast, deadly, and unwavering. Sarah watched Cole, her heart swelling with gratitude and a newfound hope. She saw the determination in his eyes, the unwavering commitment to doing what was right. She realized that his actions weren't just about protecting her. They were about protecting the town, about standing up for justice, about fighting for what he believed in. And she realized, with a start, that she was falling in love with him. "This ain't your fight, mister," Jed sneered. "Why don't you just ride on out of here and leave us to our business?" This is everyone's fight, Cole countered. You can't just ride into a town and terrorize people. There has to be a line. And you're drawing that line? Jed asked, his eyes narrowing. I am, Cole replied. I'm giving you one chance, Jed. Leave Dust Gulch and don't ever come back. Jed hesitated, his eyes flicking between Cole and the terrified townsfolk. He knew that Cole was a formidable opponent, a man who wouldn't back down. But he also knew that he couldn't afford to lose face. He had to maintain his reputation, his power, his control. You made your choice, Jed snarled. He drew his gun, the metallic click echoing through the silence. Cole drew his own weapon, his movements fluid and lightning fast. The two men faced each other, their eyes locked in a deadly stare. The air crackled with tension, the silence broken only by the sound of their heavy breathing. Cole wasn't just protecting Sarah and the town. He was fighting for something more. He was fighting for the hope that even in the darkest corners of the West, justice could prevail. He was fighting for the belief that even a small, insignificant town like Dust Gulch could be free from tyranny. And he was fighting for the chance to build a life with Sarah, a life filled with peace, love, and hope. He aimed his gun. The guns were drawn. The air crackled with anticipation. But in Sarah's mind, a different battle raged. She watched Cole and Jed face each other, two figures silhouetted against the dying light, and felt a wave of conflicting emotions wash over her. She had once been captivated by Jed, by his charisma, his recklessness, his promise of a life beyond the confines of Dust Gulch. He had awakened something within her, a longing for adventure, for passion, for a world that she had only dreamed of. She remembered the stolen moments, the whispered promises, the feel of his arms around her. But now, she saw him for what he truly was, a dangerous, unpredictable man who cared only for himself. His love, if it could even be called that, was possessive and destructive. And then there was Cole. He was everything that Jed wasn't: calm, steady, and honorable. He had risked his life to protect her in the town, not out of a sense of obligation, but out of a genuine commitment to doing what was right. He didn't seek glory or recognition. He simply wanted to help those in need. She saw in him a quiet strength, a deep well of compassion, and a capacity for love that she had never thought possible. She admired his courage, his integrity, and his unwavering sense of justice. But the fear for her child overshadowed everything. Jed was the father, and regardless of his flaws, she knew a part of him would always want to claim his offspring. What kind of life would her child have, raised in the shadow of an outlaw? And if Cole prevailed, what would become of them? Would he want to take on the responsibility of raising another man's child? Could she even ask him to? She closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of her decisions. She knew that whatever happened, her life would never be the same. The past had come back to haunt her, and the future was uncertain. A sudden movement snapped her back to reality. Jed made the first move, firing his gun with a deafening roar. Cole reacted instantly, his movements fluid and lightning fast. The gunfight had begun. Sarah screamed, her hand flying her mouth. She watched in horror as the two men exchanged shots, bullets whizzing through the air, tearing through the silence. She prayed for Cole's safety, but she also feared for Jed's. He was the father of her child, and she didn't want to see him die. The gunfight raged on, the outcome uncertain. Sarah knew that she couldn't just stand there and watch. She had to do something, anything, to protect the people she cared about. But what could she do? She was just a pregnant woman, alone and vulnerable in the middle of a deadly showdown. And then, she had an idea, a desperate, risky plan that could either save them all or get her killed. She took a deep breath and prepared to act. The gunfight was a blur of motion and sound. Jed, fueled by rage and desperation, fired wildly, bullets tearing holes in the wooden buildings and kicking up dust from the ground. Cole, calm and collected, moved with a practiced precision, each shot carefully aimed, each movement calculated. Jed's men scattered, seeking cover, but they were no match for Cole's skill. One by one, they fell, their bodies crumpling to the ground. Cole was a whirlwind of death and justice, a force to be reckoned with. Sarah, seeing an opportunity, put her plan into action. She ran towards the saloon, dodging bullets and debris, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that the saloon had a back door that led to an alleyway, a potential escape route for the townsfolk. Inside the saloon, she found Old Man Hemlock cowering behind the bar. "Help me," she shouted. "We need to get everyone out of here." Hemlock, spurred into action, he moved with a speed and ferocity that belied his size, his eyes burning with a murderous rage. Cole, despite his skill, was beginning to tire. He had taken a bullet to the shoulder, and his movements were becoming sluggish. He knew that he couldn't keep this up forever. Jed saw his opportunity. He charged at Cole, firing his gun at point-blank range. Cole ducked, the bullet whizzing past his head. He retaliated, firing his own weapon. The bullet struck Jed in the chest, sending him staggering backwards. He clutched at his wound, his eyes widening in disbelief. He looked at Cole, his face contorted with pain and anger. "You," he gasped, his voice choked with blood. "You can't win." Cole stood over him, his gun still smoking. "It's over, Jed," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You've brought nothing but pain and suffering to this town. It's time for it to end." Jed's eyes flickered, then glazed over. He crumpled to the ground, dead. The gunfight was over. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of Sarah's sobs. Cole stood there, his body aching, his shoulder bleeding, his heart heavy. He had killed a man, the father of Sarah's child. He had brought peace to Dust Gulch, but at a terrible cost. He looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with remorse and uncertainty. What would become of them now? He had freed her from Jed's tyranny, but had he also destroyed her future? He hoped, with every fiber of his being, that he hadn't. He saw her start to move towards him. Sarah rushed to Cole, her eyes filled with tears. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice trembling. Cole nodded, wincing as he moved his injured shoulder. "I'll be fine," he said, his gaze meeting hers. He saw the fear and uncertainty in her eyes, and his heart ached for her. The townsfolk slowly emerged from their hiding places, their faces etched with relief and gratitude. They gathered around Cole, offering their thanks and congratulations. But Sarah noticed a subtle shift in their demeanor, a coolness in their eyes. The initial relief soon gave way to suspicion and resentment. Some whispered behind their hands, casting furtive glances at Sarah. "She brought all this trouble to town," one woman muttered. "If it weren't for her, Jed would have never come back." "She's a jinx," another added. "Bad luck follows her wherever she goes." Sarah felt a wave of shame and despair wash over her. She had hoped that Jed's death would bring peace to Dust Gulch, but instead, it had only deepened her isolation. She was now more ostracized than ever, branded as the woman who had brought death and destruction to their town. Cole noticed the change in the townsfolk's attitude. He stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Sarah is not to blame for any of this," he said, his voice firm and unwavering. "She was a victim, just like the rest of you. Jed was a dangerous man, and he would have found a way to cause trouble, regardless." His words had little effect. The townsfolk remained unconvinced, their resentment simmering beneath the surface. They saw Sarah as a reminder of the violence and chaos that had engulfed their town, a symbol of their vulnerability and their loss of innocence. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah's isolation deepened. She found herself alone, shunned by the townsfolk, her only companion the growing child within her. She spent her days in her room above the general store, staring out the window, wondering what the future held. She knew that she couldn't stay in Dust Gulch. She was a pariah, an outcast, a burden to the town. But where could she go? She had no family, no friends, no money. She was alone, pregnant, and facing an uncertain future. Cole, despite his best efforts, couldn't bridge the gap between Sarah and the townsfolk. He tried to reason with them, to remind them of Sarah's bravery and her willingness to risk her life to protect them. But their resentment was too deep-seated, their fear too overwhelming. He knew that he couldn't force them to accept Sarah, but he also knew that he couldn't leave her alone. He had grown to care for her deeply, to admire her strength and her resilience. He wanted to protect her, to provide for her, to give her and her child a future. He knew he had to make a choice that would change his life forever. The town wasn't accepting her, and he was the only one who could make a real difference in her life. Cole found Sarah sitting on the porch of the general store, gazing out at the vast, empty landscape. The setting sun cast long shadows, mirroring the darkness in her eyes. He sat down beside her, the wooden planks creaking softly beneath his weight. "You all right, Sarah?" he asked, his voice gentle. She shook her head, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I don't know what to do, Cole," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I can't stay here. They all hate me." "They don't hate you," Cole countered, but his voice lacked conviction. He knew that her words held a painful truth. "Yes, they do," she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. "They see me as a curse, a jinx. They think I brought all this trouble to town." Cole reached out and took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "They're wrong, Sarah," he said, his voice firm. "You're not to blame for any of this. You're a good person, a strong person, and you deserve to be happy." Sarah looked at him, her eyes searching his. "But what am I going to do, Cole?" she asked, her voice filled with despair. "Where am I going to go?" Cole took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that the words he was about to say would change his life forever. He looked into her eyes, his gaze filled with love and determination. "Marry me, Sarah," he said, his voice low and sincere. Sarah stared at him, her eyes widening in disbelief. "What?" she whispered. "Marry me," Cole repeated, his grip tightening on her hand. "I know it's not traditional. I know you're carrying another man's child. But I don't care. I love you, Sarah. I love your strength, your kindness, your spirit. And I want to spend the rest of my life with you, protecting you, providing for you, and raising your child as my own." Sarah was speechless, tears streaming down her face. She had never expected such a proposal, especially not from a man like Cole. He was a gunslinger, a loner, a man who had always lived on the edge. What would he want with a pregnant woman, ostracized by her own community? But why?" she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. "Why would you want to marry me? I'm nothing but trouble." "You're not trouble, Sarah," Cole said, his voice tender. "You're a woman who's been through a lot, a woman who deserves to be loved and cherished. And I want to be the one to do that." He paused, his eyes searching hers. "I know it won't be easy," he continued. "There will be people who judge us, who whisper behind our backs. But I don't care what they think. All I care about is you and our future together." He squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with unwavering love. "So what do you say, Sarah?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Will you marry me?" He held his breath, waiting for her answer. He knew it was a risk, a gamble that could either bring him immense happiness or crush his heart. But he was willing to take that chance, because he knew, deep down, that Sarah was worth it. She was worth everything. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, a mixture of joy, relief, and disbelief. She looked at Cole, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. He was offering her a lifeline, a chance at a new beginning, a future she never thought possible. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Cole, I'll marry you." Cole smiled, his eyes shining with happiness. He gently wiped away her tears, his touch tender and loving. "I promise I won't let you down, Sarah," he said, his voice sincere. "I'll do everything in my power to make you happy." The news of their impending marriage spread quickly through Dust Gulch, eliciting a mixed reaction from the townsfolk. Some remained skeptical, whispering their disapproval behind their hands. Others, touched by Cole's unwavering commitment and Sarah's quiet strength, offered their tentative support. Mrs. Henderson, the kindly woman who had always shown Sarah kindness, volunteered to help with the wedding arrangements. She cleaned and pressed Sarah's best dress, a simple but elegant gown of pale blue. She also baked a small wedding cake, its frosting adorned with delicate wildflowers. Old Man Hemlock, despite his gruff exterior, offered Cole a bottle of his finest whiskey, a gesture of respect and acceptance. He even agreed to perform the wedding ceremony, his voice surprisingly steady and solemn. The wedding was a small affair, held in the general store, its shelves cleared to make room for the few guests who attended. Cole stood tall and proud, his eyes fixed on Sarah as she walked towards him, her face radiant with happiness. She took his hand, her touch sending a shiver of excitement down his spine. He looked at her, his heart overflowing with love. She was more beautiful than he had ever imagined, her eyes shining with hope and a newfound sense of peace. Hemlock read the vows, his voice echoing through the silent store. Cole and Sarah repeated after him, their voices filled with emotion. They promised to love, honor, and cherish each other, through good times and bad, for as long as they both should live. When Hemlock pronounced them husband and wife, Cole gently lifted Sarah's veil and kissed her, his lips tender and loving. The few guests who attended applauded softly, their faces filled with warmth and acceptance. In that moment, surrounded by the simple beauty of their love and the quiet support of their friends, Sarah felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had found solace in Cole's unwavering commitment, hope in his gentle kindness, and a future she could finally believe in. She was no longer alone. She was loved, cherished, and finally, truly happy. Her new life with Cole had begun, and even though she knew there would still be challenges ahead, she was ready to face them, hand in hand with the man she loved. Years passed. Dust Gulch slowly healed, the scars of Jed's reign fading with time. Cole and Sarah, however, decided to build their life away from the town, seeking a fresh start in a place where they could raise their child in peace. They found a small ranch nestled in a valley a few days' ride from Dust Gulch. The land was harsh and unforgiving, but it was also beautiful, with towering mesas and endless skies. They built a small cabin, its walls sturdy and its roof strong enough to withstand the fiercest storms. Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom they named Samuel. Cole loved Samuel as if he were his own, teaching him how to ride a horse, how to shoot a gun, and how to respect the land. He never spoke of Jed, allowing Samuel to form his own identity, free from the shadow of his father's reputation. Life on the ranch was hard, filled with long days and backbreaking work. They faced droughts, blizzards, and the constant threat of wild animals. But they persevered, their love for each other and for Samuel giving them the strength to overcome any obstacle. Cole continued to work as a gunslinger, taking on odd jobs to earn a living. He was careful to choose his battles wisely, only using his skills to protect the innocent and uphold justice. He never forgot the weight of taking a life, and he always carried the memory of Jed with him, a reminder of the darkness that lurked within the human heart. Sarah blossomed into a strong and capable woman, learning to ride, hunt, and defend herself. She also became a skilled healer, using herbs and remedies to care for her family and their neighbors. She found solace in the beauty of the natural world, and she taught Samuel to appreciate the simple things in life: the warmth of the sun, the coolness of the water, the beauty of the stars. Their life wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt and uncertainty, times when the past threatened to resurface. But they faced these challenges together, their love growing stronger with each passing year. One evening, as the sun set over the mesas, Cole and Sarah sat on their porch, watching Samuel play in the yard. Cole put his arm around Sarah, drawing her close. "We made it, didn't we?" he said, his voice filled with contentment. Sarah smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Yes, we did," she replied. "We built a good life, a happy life. And it's all thanks to you, Cole." Cole shook his head. "It's thanks to both of us, Sarah," he said. "We did this together." They sat in silence, watching Samuel run and play, their hearts filled with love and gratitude. They knew that their journey had been long and difficult, but they had finally found peace and happiness in the harsh landscape of the Wild West. The challenges may continue, but their love, their resilience, and their commitment to each other would see them through. Their story was a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. It was a story of hope, a story of redemption, and a story that would be told for generations to come.